has given India its strongest warning yet over their month-long border dispute. Why has China stepped up its rhetoric at this particular time? And after Chinese swimmer Sun Yang won his third world title in Budapest, another row has erupted after Mac Horton called him a drug cheat. What's behind this latest war of words? Welcome to The Point. I'm Natalie Wong, sitting in for Liu Xin. The Sino-Indian military standoff in the Doklam region continues, with China on Monday issuing its strongest warning yet to India over their month-long border dispute, saying Beijing would protect its sovereignty at all costs. Speaking just a week ahead of the 90th anniversary of the founding of the People's Liberation Army, Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Qian said, "We urge the Indian side not to take any chances or hold any illusions." He also added that it's easier to shake the mountain than to shake the PLA. The statement comes day before a high-level security officials meeting of the BRICS countries, in which the military standoff is likely to be at the top of the agenda. So why is China stepping up its rhetoric at this particular time? Meanwhile, on the Indian side, a candidate of the National Democratic Alliance, Ram Nath Kovind, has won the presidential election, becoming the second president of India from the Dalit community. Will he have any influence on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's policymaking? Joining me from New Delhi is Srikanth Kondapalli, a professor at the Chinese Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. And in Beijing, Mr. Ye Hailin, director of the Center for South Asia Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. So let me start with our Chinese guest. Mr. Ye, Chinese and Indian forces remain locked in a standoff sparked by a local road construction project in a disputed border area shared with Bhutan. But the Chinese Defense Ministry has just issued its strongest warning yet over the standoff. So what message is China sending?
Firstly, I would like to clarify that this area is not a dispute area. It's Chinese territory. It's for sure, because it's recognized by the treaty signed almost 130 years ago and recognized by Indian government. Although Bhutan has some different opinion, but we also know for the very long term of the bilateral negotiation between China and Bhutan, these areas have never been on the target of the dispute. So we should clarify this. Not a dispute areas. So that's why Chinese attitude towards such kind of the accident is quite different away from the former accident happened before. And this time, I think for China, there's one thing for sure. Before the Indian army intrude Chinese territory, withdraw completely from Chinese territory, there won't be any negotiation. And China won't just sit down and stand off waiting for the season or the weather to change the whole atmosphere and make the two sides just separate and withdraw back to their stronghold. I don't think so. It's not an option.
Well, of course, that's a precondition that the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the Defense Ministry have been issuing all the time. So let me turn to our New Delhi guest here, Professor Kondapalli. So why do you think the things have turned so strongly in the past few days ahead of very important military level, security level conversation between the BRICS countries?
I think if you carefully look at Senior Colonel Wu Qian's statement, it also mentions a kind of conciliatory gesture. In his comments, he also mentioned that China is prepared to walk half the way. So this is the conciliatory gesture, which means that just a couple of days before, State Councillor Yang Jiechi, as well as the National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, are meeting for the preparatory work for the BRICS summit meeting in Xiamen. There is also a chance for both of them to de-escalate tensions in this area.
But is it possible that China would walk halfway? Mr. Ye, does Beijing have any stronger bargaining power in the talks with New Delhi?
I think firstly we should also clarify one, this the high-level meeting between Mr. Duwa and Mr. Yang Jiechi is not for the current accident. It's only for the purpose of ensure the success of the BRICS summit. I don't think that these two high-level security officers will engage how to solve the problem at the border. And firstly, and secondly, we also should notice that the Chinese MFA and the PRA's attitude on so-called soft the tones has some precondition that the Indian army should leave the territory completely, and there's a precondition for the further negotiation. So China do leave the door open, but this open not for the totally for free. It's actually have some conditions, and currently I don't think China will has a kind of the alternative plan that's one while the Indian army still leave the Chinese territory and then launch the formal diplomatic channel to bargain or to negotiate. It's highly unlikely.
Professor Kondapalli, Narendra Modi's government has said India will be patient and peaceful in dealing with its neighbors, but like Mr. Ye said, China is insisting on a withdrawal of Indian troops from the region as a precondition for dialogue. Do you think India would follow suit?
It's always when two hands meet, you get the sound, you get the clap. I do not think that the only one precondition will prevail at the end. If there is no mutual concession on either side. For example, the External Affairs Minister, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, spoke in the Indian Parliament the other day, and she suggested to mutual withdrawal, number one. Number two, she also suggested to the security concerns for India in terms of this road construction activity, and suggested that the status quo on June 15th should prevail in this area.
Well, I'm glad you quoted a very ancient Chinese saying that only two hands can form a clap. So, Mr. Ye, is it possible that there will be a mutual withdrawal, or China is still holding on to its precondition?
If such kind of accident happened on the dispute areas, it will be the neutral step, or we can see that both sides will take some effort. But now it's the non-dispute areas. Legally, it's an intrusion, and we don't negotiate with the intruders. That's for sure. Just like we don't negotiate with anyone to stay on our territories. That's also for sure. For China's understanding that's very obviously India want to have so both sides withdraw their troops and suspend their construction. So can we say that if India want to argue that China to suspend their infrastructure construction, China will raise the same argument that India had to suspend all the construction, the infrastructure construction alongside the border, even on the disputed border? I don't think India will consider this condition. So it's really not very far enough to say that the mutual consensus. Actually, I think we are far away from that.
Professor Kondapalli, this strong rhetoric from the Chinese side and from our Chinese guests as well, will India, accept this term of intrusion? What is New Delhi responding to this?
I think there are two basic things in this, as been articulated by the Bhutanese side in terms of the High Commissioner of Bhutan in his statement on June 29th in New Delhi about the status quo that has to prevail up to the June 14-15th level. That means no road construction activity. Secondly, that India also had gone into that area, citing the 2007 Article 2, which suggests between Bhutan and India, would suggest to the protection of the Bhutanese security and sovereignty. And big nations do come to the rescue of small nations, and the audience would know that United States has alliance systems which it invokes time and again. China, with its 1961 treaty with North Korea, sometimes comes to the rescue of North Korea as well, citing the treaty obligations between the two sides. So I think the Indian side had suggested to Article 2 of the 2007 treaty between Bhutan and India in this context. Secondly, there is also the understanding between India and China, also between China and Bhutan in 1988 and 1998 between China and Bhutan, as well as the 2012 understanding between India and China at the special representative level, that the status quo should not be changed on the ground by any construction activity in the areas of territorial disputes between nations. So flowing from this, there is the Indian presence there.
Well, there's a common saying among the international community that India is now painting a picture of China being the bully, and India comes to Bhutan's rescue. As you mentioned, big countries would come to the help of smaller countries. But Mr. Ye, what's your take on this?
Firstly, Bhutan's High Commissioner released a statement in New Delhi, but we also know Bhutan is fully controlled by India, so it won't be very difficult to get such kind of statement, I think, in the perspective of the Indian government. Secondly, we should know that before this intrusion, there's already been a host of very long-time peace between China and Bhutan, so it won't be the problem. And such kind of the territory dispute could be solved by the China and the Bhutan side bilaterally. Thirdly, we should notice that India's armies across the Sikkim, Pradesh, and Chinese Tibet border is not from Bhutan. So why India thought they has the right can cross the China and the Indian border to protect Bhutan? This will be a very important or essential problem. For China's understanding that Bhutan is the only reason, because we also know in according to the Indians mass media, Indians' real concern is that so-called their national security and national interest in their territory, so that Indian thought such kind of construction will bring some negative impact to the Indians' territory and the national security. We fully understand that, but Indians' similar construction also bring a lot of the negative impact to China. Is there any case China do the same thing just like the Indian did 1 month ago?
Well, this region is full of chaos right now. Last week, China conducted live fire drills on the Qinghai-Tibet plateau, close to the site of the current standoff, something that the Chinese Defense Ministry vowed that would continue until India withdraws from this region as a precondition. And earlier, India also conducted a joint military drill with the U.S. and Japan in the region. So from what you're seeing right now, could the situation spiral out of control? I mean, are we looking at a war, Mr. Ye?
I think China doesn't have this card. This card is on the hand of the Indian side. If India withdraw their military presence from Chinese territory, everything could be discussed. But if India stay there, I think everything is possible.
Professor Konapalli, do you think a war is coming?
No, I don't think so, because the current standoff is between roughly 200 troops on either side. They are sitting there, they're not doing anything to provoke or to graduate to another scenario in this area. And there is also no large-scale movement of troops on either side, which suggests that there is actually no preparation for war to come into that region, number one. Number two, the area is not so valuable for both sides to wage a war, so that the 2.5 billion people of China and India come to loggerheads on a piece of land which is not really a major, it doesn't have resources, it doesn't have much significance from the point of view of conducting a large-scale war, or even a localized skirmish is ruled out, because we don't see any such activity on either side, both India and China. So I see a very less possibility of a war between the two sides.
Looking inside India, Ramnath Kovind has just
the war is actually
sworn in as India's 14th president on Tuesday. A lawyer by qualification, Kovind served as the governor of Bihar and just as the BJP MP serving on various parliamentary committees. Traditionally, the presidents of India just act as a figurehead, but can Kovind try to influence Prime Minister Narendra Modi's policy making? Professor Konapalli.
Yes, President Kovind just took over this today, and he made a very elaborate statement during his swearing-in ceremony. I think this is a bottom-up kind of approach, where he cited the common people, the occupations, their welfare, their socio-economic future benefits, and so on. He also cited the 2022 kind of landmark where India would have to exert itself in developmental process. It is much like the Chinese Xiaokang Xiaohui by 2020, which China wants to build, as the 16th Party Congress mentioned before in 2002. So it's something like that, that India is also kind of learning to propose to the Indian people. So the new president's speech was a kind of a roadmap for socio-economic development process, number one. Number two, to what extent I think he would influence Prime Minister Modi, since, as you mentioned, he is a titular head. The real power is in the Prime Minister of India, and so the advice from the President is generally taken care of by the Prime Ministers before, and since both of them belong to the same political persuasion, that is, as you know, Mr. Kovind before worked for the Bharatiya Janata Party. He also was part of the parliament before as a member of parliament, and hence I think there is the wavelength for both of them is matching in terms of the political spectrum. So which suggests that the advice is taken because they have a similar political persuasion, and so I would believe that there will be some coordination between the two. Unlike the previous presidents, the speech also suggests to some kind of active role for the president in the socio-economic kind of process. So I would say that I would believe that there will be a lot of work between them in terms of the socio-economic aspects. He also mentioned in the inaugural speech that the neighboring countries...
Thank you, Professor Kondapalli. I'm sorry, but that's all the time we have for this part of conversation. Thank you very much. That was Srikanth Kondapalli from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and here in Beijing, Mr. Ye Hailin from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Appreciate it, gentlemen. China and India have faced off frequently since fighting a bloody war in 1962. Negotiations since the 1980s to settle the border dispute have made little progress. India regards securing the disputed Doklam Plateau as essential to maintaining its control over a land corridor that connects India's mainland with its remote northeastern states. China, meanwhile, has been frustrated with India's refusal to sign on to a massive effort to build railways, ports and roads reaching from Asia to Europe and the Middle East. Despite their disagreement, China and India have stepped up cooperation in agriculture, science and cultural exchanges. We have no idea as yet whether India's new president will change the status quo in India, but both sides' diplomats have quietly engaged in trying to keep the standoff from escalating and finding a way for both sides to back down without loss of face.